Okay.
There we go. So welcome, friends on YouTube. We're glad you're here. We're just about ready to start. We're waiting for the last stragglers to join us. So thanks for being with us, and we'll get going formally in about 60 seconds. So Clyde, you need to show us the beard. How's it coming along?
Or even turn his head.
I can't even see the bottom of it now.
Oh, you.
Fabulous. You put pandemic haircuts into a totally different light.
Are we supposed to be able to trust an accountant with long hair?
Oh, yes. Well, on that note, I think we should begin.
Okay.
So friends, welcome. We're glad you're here, and thanks for joining us. My name is Stephen Fetter, and I manage the United in Learning program for the General Counsel Office, and I'm kind of your host tonight. Most of you, I think, have been here many times before, and so you know the drill, and I'm not going to give you a whole lot of instruction. I do want to just acknowledge that I am watching the chat in YouTube as well as the chat here in Zoom, and my job is to kind of curate the questions that come in. So as we move along, if you have questions, if you have thoughts and ideas and concerns, write them in the chat. With 200 people online, we can't possibly open the mics and just have you ask your question. But I'll do the best I can to keep track of all the questions and put them in categories and make sure that you get a hearing. And if I miss one or two, my apologies. Eric and Clyde, they all read the chat afterwards, and they will follow up with individual questions too. So that's kind of how we've been managing things, and so far it seems to be working well enough that people keep coming back, and that's always encouraging. So friends, welcome, and let me turn things over to Eric to kick us off. Eric, over to you.
Okay, good evening, folks. I'm recognizing a fair number of names here, but you know the drill. We have a bit of a pattern that we start with. And the first thing is just a land acknowledgement. Angelica, Clyde, Steve, and I, we're all, I think, close enough in the Toronto area to say that we are all on the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples. And Toronto is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. In Toronto, we acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13, signed with the Mississaugas of the Credit, and the Williams Treaties, signed with multiple Mississaugas and Chippewa bands. So with that, we always have the creed as well. We are called to be the church, and I don't read it out. We're all in this together. I think we've learned to say we're not in the same boat, but we are being church together and helping each other out. And you'll hear even more about that in just a minute. So what we're going to cover tonight, let's see. Monday, the federal government announced that the loan program deadline, which had been March 31st, is now June 30th. I've been working with a few congregations this week to meet that deadline. And I just wish I'd thought of saying, oh, the government will probably extend it, relax. But instead, we actually got a few done. The Q's period 7 deadline is tomorrow, just in case anyone's working to deadline, which at least I, as a church treasurer, have been known to do. And we've got a bit of very general information so far, but a commitment to the faith communities in Ontario with a budget announcement that just came out at about 4:30 this afternoon, so just a couple of hours ago. And then we've got some updates, your questions, a number of clarifications. In all cases, we're trying to respond to whatever you've asked for or whatever people seem to be asking about the most. So again, just a bit of a commercial. All this stuff we do, Steve, Angelica, myself, this is support work funded by assessment. But the reason any of us are doing this work is not just because we love numbers and spreadsheets and government rules and stuff like that. We've got to remember that that's all just part of stuff that has to get done in order to pursue the actual mission of the church. And so here's a little ad for mission and service, some of the resources. Hopefully you or someone in your congregations are receiving the updates. We're trying to do a lot more on video. We're trying to do a lot more stories of transformation. And just a reminder that the stewardship best practice, again, there's a lot of work being done, and so much of all of us have had to adapt in terms of the stewardship practices and getting more online and so on. So just a reminder of some other resources that are available. And with that, this is an email I just got the other day. I wanted to share it with you. I'm going to read it, just an update to let you know that we qualified for the $60,000 CEBA loan on Thursday. So I got this, I think, late last week. So I get a shout out for encouraging folks to keep going on this. But Edna Cook of Upper Tantalon, Nova Scotia, gets a special shout out because she would not quit. And in fact, I probably even told her at some point, Edna, you've done everything possible, but she would not quit and kept after her local bank and got her congregation, St. Luke's, a CEBA loan in the fall, and now was providing tips to Christine out in Alberta. And the main message is the one I've been telling you all along is you can't just accept no at the local branch level. You've got to apply online. There's a system now where you need to get your application in as opposed to taking any kind of verbal yes or no from a local bank manager. That's not a knock against bank managers. That's just the thing has been moving so fast that we know certain congregations qualify for these loans, even though some of the local bank material is contradictory. So anyway, thank you, Christine. But Christine had heard me mention Edna before, but Edna, I have never met her. I don't know. I think I've talked to her once or twice. But I can tell you the Bank of Nova Scotia is afraid of her. And I do mean that as a compliment. Okay, so this is a repeat slide from last time in case we have new folks. The world has changed a ton in 12 months. Most of us were able to hide from online accounts and my business account and various things like that a year ago. No longer the case. We also found, frankly, especially when it came to the wage subsidies, that some of our local practices, including ones that my own church did, I'm not pointing fingers at anybody, were kind of penny wise and pound foolish. So at this stage, a year later, we're online in some fashion, whether we like it or not. We had to get online just at least to qualify for wage subsidies and let alone everything else. So at this point, it should be the norm for there to be at least 3 online accounts, the My Business account or perhaps a representative, but basically being able to deal with CRA online is almost essential. Church Hub is just rolling out, but it's going to be the way that we collect information from you in a hopefully much more painless way. I love Susan Jackson, but I hate those blue forms, I got to tell you. And Angelica has been spearheading, some modernization of the whole payroll side too. So a lot has happened in the last 12 months. Again, a repeat slide for any new people, but we're bucking a lot of trends. There's inflation, a bit of inflation anytime. But our benefit costs are increasing. We literally administer the overall benefit programs with administration fees. There's no insurance company profit. There's no insurance company. It's literally based on the amount of claims we have, and we have to, that needs to be in balance So there's, there has been some escalation in those costs. Property and liability insurance is, that market is going, frankly, nuts. I've never seen anything like it. And I used to work in the insurance business. We've also got, the overall assessment process is going to be transitioning to the final amounts over the next year. So there's a whole bunch of stuff that are upward and challenging pressures for, let alone COVID. I haven't even mentioned COVID. So with that, our first presenter, where you don't have to listen to my voice all the time tonight, is Angelica.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for having me, and I hope everyone is all well. I'm just going to provide you with a little bit of update with regards to your fabulous new payroll software, TimPay. Can I have the next slide? Okay, so for everyone knows that there is two phases to the project. For anyone who is new, phase one has been completed. The upgrade to the back end of the system is done, and we are at the beginning stages of phase two. That has not gone out yet, but the pilot project is still in process. So if I can get you to turn to the next page for me. Okay, so I'm just going to provide you with a little bit of updates and reminders about the phase one. So phase one, we had 1,600 pastoral charges that are now able to access reports, pay statements, year-end reports, activity reports, T4s via TimPay. You're available to access them 24/7. We also have a user guide in our pastoral charge payroll service site. If you're having some challenges, you can also email our pastoral charge payroll service team if you need some assistance, if you're not able to access them. ADP is also there to provide you some assistance, but if you can't get a hold of them, they are inundated with phone calls and emails. So please feel free to call us and we'll be able to support you. A couple of reminders. So the phase one and the current phase two with the pilot project, please remember that you are still going to continue to fax or phone any payroll changes. You cannot send any payroll changes to that email address that I've just posted there, Canada SBS. That email address is specifically and only when you want the change of contact or the name of a new treasurer or a new authorized ADP contact. So do not use that email address because your payroll tasks that you've assigned ADP, it's not going to happen. They won't process it. So please be mindful about that. In addition to, as you know, with phase one, we require the acknowledgement form for you to be upgraded to TimPay. There was a specific email address. That email address is specifically for that acknowledgement form. Again, we have pastoral charges using that email address for payroll changes. So please be mindful about those two important reminders. So phase two, we can get to the next page. So as discussed before, we have 16 congregations who have completed the 2 payroll runs already. This is our pilot project. No issues thus far. Good feedback as we continue to gather more input. This Friday, we have actually 2 special meetings to discuss how well it went or what are some of the areas that we can improve. We've received 1,200 acknowledgement forms, but we still have 400 outstanding. If you are new to this and you haven't heard about TimPay, please send us an email, let us know, and we'll be able to support you. We're continuing to build tools and resources, a combination of webinars and user guides that are going to eventually be posted on our payroll site. We are continuing to explore the pastoral charges that are set to run as is, and we hear your concern. We've had quite a few emails in this regard. So we're working very diligently with ADP to find a solution for the as-is payrolls. In terms of the phase 2 going live, the first set of pastoral charges, there's going to be approximately around 318, and that's not going to happen until at least mid-April. Be assured that you will receive a notice, and a rollout plan will be communicated prior to going live. So we're hoping that, as Eric would say, I have a dream to have every church join ADP and have the payroll processing automated and ensure that there's a payroll administrator at your church, and of course also the national team to be there to support you with any of your payroll questions. Can I get that?
Before you go on to the next slide, Angelica, a couple of people are asking, what does it mean by an as-is church?
So these are payrolls that have been run, that have been set up to run as is without having to ADP call the pastoral charge. It automatically runs every month.
Okay, so it doesn't require any monthly intervention.
No, that's
by
right.
the treasurer.
That's right.
And so back up just a little bit, because a couple of people are not clear. What's the difference between phase 1 and phase 2? What's the phase 2 about?
So the phase 2 is when we all go live. The phase 1 was the upgrade of the backend system, and it allowed only for you to access reports. You were provided with a new ID and a login. So that was phase 1, and that has been completed. Everyone by now should have a new login and new ID. And if you haven't, you must email our ADP, or you must email my email addresses at the end of this presentation, at the end of this slide, or also our payroll service provider.
Okay, so that's great, because before that you could only get your reports from Internet Explorer, which nobody uses anymore. What's new in phase 2, and what are we going to get when we get to there? Can you give us
well, phase 2, once we go live, it's the next slide.
Okay, thank you. So are we looking for the next slide? There it is.
There we go. So what will you get when we go on phase 2 live? You are going to have full control of your payroll. You can make changes at any time, 24/7, 24 hours, 7 days a week, whenever you want, from your tablet, from your desktop, from anywhere. You're going to be able to view all your payroll schedules, make any changes that you want, new hire, terminations, make any adjustments at any time. You're not going to have to call ADP. You're not going to have to fax any information. The national team will be there to support you if you need assistance. But we're in essence automating all of the processes.
Yeah. And it's Eric. This is what many of you have been calling for years. The idea of waiting on the phone, particularly during COVID time, was made even worse because every business that is in the service business suddenly had phone queues. I don't know if you tried to phone a bank or anything else. However, it has meant, again, learning a few new systems. But right now, this will work on any device. Full portal capability, on one level it's long overdue, but for some of us it's a challenge because we're having to learn new stuff, and even the the as is kind of unusual because most people running a payroll will always look at a payroll at least once a month to double check and release it. But we've gotten in the habit of running on an as is basis, and we're trying to figure that out.
So a couple of people in the chat asking, does that mean that we will not have anybody on an as-is basis eventually, that every treasurer is going to have to look at this every pay period?
There is that possibility. I mean, there are going to be exceptions for those pastoral charges who are perhaps very technically challenged. We want to be able to offer the as-is if needed, but long-term, we want everyone to be able to actually go in monthly to check their payrolls. So there isn't any issues or concerns at the end of the year. We do run into problems at year end when information hasn't been checked throughout the year.
So there's some anxiety coming in through the chat that this means extra work for treasurers, but I think what you're trying to tell us is that this actually gives treasurers a whole lot more hands-on control, which is what most business operators want and what a lot of payroll people want too.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Sorry to interrupt there. I wanted to pick up those questions before we lost them.
No, that's all right.
And this is a slide that I just can't repeat often enough. Angelica and the payroll team helping get us through that whole PD 27 business, frankly, providing, detailed explanations and help training and coaching so many treasurers literally every day. So this, you are helping us leapfrog into the future, and it does, it does mean, having to learn some new ways, but all of the ways we're learning right now are considered best practice. So, hopefully once we get past that little change time, we'll look back on this and realize that it wasn't so bad and we're way better off. And certainly that's been my own congregation's experience. We resisted ADP for a long time, frankly.
So training, you're talking about training and people are anxious about it. So as we move into phase 2 and people have to take on this new responsibility, there's some anxiety here that they'll screw it up. How is training available and what are you doing there? Angelica, you've muted yourself by mistake. There you go.
Sorry. We continue to look at ways for training. So we're planning to do a 2-approach training, which is one-to-one, as well as offer an abundance of webinars and other tools that are going to be helpful as you move through, the different stages of learning, all of the different screens of payroll. Not to worry, we are thinking very hardly about this. And again, I'm working with ADP very closely to ensure that we have a full plan before we go live. So do not fear, do not be anxious. There will be full communication and training before we go live.
And folks, hopefully you've already gotten a sense of the extent of support. Many of you have already been working with Angelica's team, and part of having you authorize them was to have a further avenue for support and training. So, we'll be very attentive to this, and
Sure.
Our hope is that we'll, once you've had the training and run a cycle or two, that you'll feel very, very comfortable indeed.
I would say, as I'm looking at the chat, there's a couple of people who are having a hard time. There's a lot of other people who are saying, this has been wonderful. We're so grateful. So clearly the reviews are mixed and making a shift is always hard. Mm-hmm. But I would encourage the people who are having a hard time to reach out to Angelica and her team.
Absolutely.
That's what they're there for. And
absolutely.
I hope that with a little bit of extra support, you will find it is as a positive experience as the folks who are also writing in the chat that it's been good. From the perspective of my pastoral charge, I mean, my finance people authorize every invoice every month that comes in. These days I'm checking the church's mail and I just pop them into a folder, and so we look at the heating bill and we look at the utility, the electric bill, and now they're going to look at this too. And it means that somebody's a little more on top of it. So they're quite excited about it. As I tell my boss, do not fear, Angelica's here. We're going to help you.
There we go. Words to live by. Words to live by. So I'll switch gears here and talk a little bit about Church Hub. Now, this is one where the treasurer rollout has gone way more smoothly than ministers, for example. Treasurers might, on average, be a little more comfortable with the tech. Not always the case, but the idea of having an online portal for statistics that's secure, that's modern, that works on any device, all those things. We're rolling that out to treasurers right now, this quarter. If you didn't receive an invitation by email, please flip a notice to either myself or to Susan Jackson. There is just a one-time setup to get you registered on the system. And then basically it's very, very user-friendly and intuitive. This view is one that many of you on this call might have. It's the overall church administrator. It's the one sort of lead contact that has the ability to access all the possible support functions within Church Hub that are offered currently. There'll be more rolled out. Right now, we roll it out literally by the word role. So treasurer is a role. Church admin, we want there to be at least one person at every pastoral charge who can go in and update the contacts, for example, because the most efficient way to get to be reaching out to everybody is if you've given us the most current information and you input it, as opposed to telephoning, or you mentioned it to someone who was going to mention it to someone, that kind of thing. So again, this is something we've been working on for a couple of years at the national level, but it's the way that we're hoping that the regions and the national office will support congregations. And all you really need to do is update your contact information, most importantly. So as I've noted before, again, this is going to be one of these things where you, for security, there'll be a user account for each treasurer with a password. We do have help desk support, as we've had for CRA and everything else. The key message here is garbage in, garbage out. So that's my way of saying the data and the system is set up to work very smoothly, and for us to have the most current information. If your treasurer is sick and someone's filling in, you could update that information and make sure you're getting the contact information updated for treasurers. It's also how we expect virtually all, the online reporting, the statistics and so on, to be submitted going forward. That's not mandatory yet, but it is, clearly it's a direction we're all going. It means that we're able to maximize the dollar available for mission, and that's again why we're here.
Okay.
So a few things about statistics.
Well, before you go on to that, there's a couple of questions that have come up, I think.
Sure.
Variety of people saying, I've got a church treasurer login, but it doesn't seem to allow me to change any of the contact information for other people. How do I find out who is my church administrator? Because something needs to be updated and it isn't showing on my page.
Okay, that's a fair question. I would hope that even a good guess might get you the answer there. But if anyone needs to know, feel free to send an email to Susan Jackson. That's sjackson@united-church.ca. Steve, if you could throw that in the chat box, that would be good.
Mm-hmm. I'm in the middle of doing that.
And basically, the treasurer is that person in about 15% of cases across the country. That other person could be in a smaller setting. It could even be the minister, but it's usually going to be a church secretary or whoever was the main email contact in smaller settings. But if you don't know, ask and we'll get you the answer.
Sure. And if you can't see the information you need, somebody else in your pastoral charge can, and it's important to keep that stuff up to date. I logged into my pastoral charge and found that my treasurer's email was wrong, and that was why she hadn't got her connection. So, this is why we need to keep this stuff up to date. Somebody's asking, could we have two treasurers able to access this? Our pastoral charge has 3 treasurers on a 2-point charge. Are we limited to only one treasurer's login?
Well, right now we are, but we can probably do that. It's just a matter of having a second account for you. So the short answer is I'm pretty sure we can do that. And again, send me an email in that case.
Great. Mary Jo says, I'm a new treasurer. I haven't got the setup information yet. How do I get it?
Again, if Susan Jackson's email is there, just again, this is how it's going to need to work on anything electronic. The existing folks are going to need to hand it off, just as part of normal transition. And if you're brand new, first of all, it's great that you're on this webinar because we can point you to a lot of resources. But just call us too. We've got all kinds of web pages and written materials, and Angelic answers dozens of questions every week. I answer dozens of questions every week, and the whole idea, frankly, the whole reason I'm here is because I was a frustrated treasurer in the first place, and wanted there to be more answers.
And okay. Jim is asking, can others with access to our church hub site change my treasurer's numbers?
No, there's basically there's going to be very tight security around each role and what people can do.
Great. I think that's
so.
It. Thank you, Vince.
Yeah. So statistics. Want to stress that that's a very key function for us. The blue forms, the annual data collection. Sometimes the statistics are used to identify trends or areas where there might be more support needed or work to be done, or maybe research. But a key one, speaking selfishly, is it feeds the whole assessment process. The whole idea of the assessments is to be transparent, fair, and in particular sharing across the country. So it's very important that we get the statistics right. And Mark Twain is famous for saying a few things here. This one is, facts are stubborn things, but statistics are much more pliable. He's also famous for saying there are lies, there are damn lies, and then there are statistics. The point being that we all need to work to get the numbers to be as consistent as we can, recognizing that there's a lot of just different ways folks organize themselves. So moving on to statistics, these are the key questions that you've been asking. The federal grant revenue, whether that's the 10% subsidy, whether that's wage subsidies, whether it's the portion of the SEBA loan, all those things are to be recorded as government grants. And another very standard question that we've been answering each time is the weekly attendance number. There's no right answer here. For some folks, it might even be 0, but there's so many of us trying to do things online that we're asking you to add the number of people at in-person worship to an online count. And there's going to be an asterisk on all these things in the current year. Want to stress that the statistics, particularly the revenue data collection, is the basis for delivering a consistent assessment, billing for 2022. So when you input your statistics for the past year, you'll actually get a report out, and this is available on the Treasurer View, of what your assessment is expected to be for 2022 based on whatever options you chose. We're also doing some work there to refine the formulas and get them more easier to understand and manage for everybody. So there'll be some refinements this year, and I'm expecting that the next webinar actually will focus on this topic. If you're not having an AGM yet, or an annual meeting, you should still do the statistics. The statistics aren't something so much to be approved. They're very much a key internal task. So we're asking that if you could submit your statistics for the past year as soon as possible, if you haven't already. It doesn't need to wait on an annual meeting. And if there was something that changed, you could work with Susan to refine that. A couple of very specific points. Investment income is a key part of the whole financial model, and we're getting very granular here. The question or code A4F is all investment income, and then A4G is unrealized market gains. Those are situations where basically you may not have even accessed any money, but your investments went up or down in a given year. If you've already submitted your information and you think there's something that isn't right or is impacted by what you learn over the next month or next month or two, it's always possible to make adjustments until we lock things down in the fall. So this is our first official stop. We've stopped a couple of times already for questions, but if there are any questions at this stage.
A couple of people seem to be having printing errors from Church Hopper. They're not able to print off what's there, or it only comes in PDF or something. Any hints or suggestions? Have you been hearing questions about that from other folks too?
I haven't, but if this is one of these where we're collecting any service issues, I do get a list every week of any improvements or any problems people are encountering. That's not one I've heard, but it could well be that my team's working on it. So if there is an issue, please send it along.
Sure.
Either in the chat box, identify your pastoral charge, or send me an email.
Yeah, thank you. A couple of people asking, when is the cap on the assessment transition ending, and we're moving into full assessment? Are you going to get to that later in the webinar?
Well, there's actually some existing work being done on that. I'm working on some recommendations. I can't predict 100% what our governors are going to choose. The plan was to move to full assessment amounts in 2022. That plan was before COVID, and we're making all kinds of other COVID adjustments. And I will probably be recommending, I've been consulting with the regions and the region executive ministers, and I expect to be making some recommendations to our governors over the next few weeks and have more information next month.
Okay, great. Thank you. From a while back, somebody was commenting on team pay. He says, every month ADP makes payroll deductions to CRA a few days late, resulting in an additional charge from the CRA to the church. Is there anything we can do to change that? I put a note in the chat saying that sounds like a church-specific issue, but if there are others who are having a similar issue, would they reach out to Angelica, or how does that work?
Yeah, I'd love to know about that, because as far as I'm concerned, if that's as stated, that's ADP's problem. However, the facts may be slightly different, so I would really want to look into that into that situation.
Okay.
That isn't how any professional payroll system works, and but there may be some unusual facts that we need to check. So again, please send that to Angelica.
Thank you. And Christine has put a note in the chat saying printing statistics reports is currently not possible, and that comes out of a conversation she had with Susan Jackson. So, and you can't even save them as a document or PDF yet. It's not been implemented. So Christine says she's asked that this be put on the list of things to do, but it hasn't happened yet.
Oh yeah, I'm sure it is. So that's helpful. Thank you.
Good. Otherwise, how can we confirm that ADP has received our acknowledgement for phase 2?
I'm
That's a
sorry.
question from YouTube.
I'm
Sorry,
sorry, what was
Angelica.
that question? I'm sorry, what was that question?
How can we confirm that ADP has received our acknowledgement to move into phase 2?
Okay, if you can send me an email, I can check on that for you.
Okay, so Robert Hahn at YouTube, send an email to Angelica, please. I think the others are pretty specific, so why don't you carry on here?
Okay, so this is if anyone's questions about the PD27 form, we covered that in considerable detail last time. So this is really a recap. just in case we have any new folks. It's still possible to send someone in, but by now, most of you should have done that. If you worked with us and ADP to do the calculations, that spreadsheet's been around for over a month now, and it was time sensitive. But just flagging for any new folks where it is. If you need to go through the details, the last webinar, last month, February, whatever it was probably in the 20s, would have that information. The spreadsheet looks like this, and it's confidential. Special cases, this is the one thing we wanted to flag, that if you didn't use the ADP process, or you did part of it, or you could still do a PD27. The only people that shouldn't submit a PD27 form are ones that did absolutely nothing on this. In other words, not only did not claim the 10% subsidy, but are choosing not to claim it even at this late date. So again, these slides are from a prior time, but I just wanted to recap it for any new people. Reporting the subsidies. This is something that we continue to get a fair number of questions on. On the statistics side, anything from the feds, whether it's the 75, the larger wage subsidy program, the 10% one from last spring, whether it's your CEBA, all of that goes as government grants. And you're going to report it on your financial statements as government grants or other income, or some way of alerting your congregation that one of the reasons things might be a little better than they would otherwise is these grants. They don't count as assessment. And on the government side, it all goes online 4540. And you're doing the usual, we've talked about the PD27 form, and you're filing for your HST or GST as usual. Just to highlight on a couple of these things now, for anyone doing wage subsidy stuff, the deadline for period 7 is tomorrow. If you're working on that, you've still got tomorrow to do it online. By now, I think most folks are familiar. The main mantra is trust the spreadsheet and have your data, have your comparative data. Even if you're brand new to this, the first thing you do is you go back and get all the months from 2019, so you've got something to compare. Okay. Another repeat slide, just because people keep questioning it. I think it's goofy too, but the forgivable portion of the CEBA loan, for those of you who've gone that route, is to be counted as revenue in 2020 if you took the loan in 2020. Obviously, if you've just gone in and gotten that loan in the current year, then we'll worry about it for 2021.
So there was a question a while back, somebody saying, when should we be starting to repay that loan?
Well, it needs to be on the basis of my advice is it depends on your cash management, but if you want to qualify for the grant and not incur interest, you need to do it by the date required in the program, which Clyde, remind me, I'm blanking at the moment. Is it December 2022? I think it might be.
Yeah, so that's my memory of it too. And Clyde, I think you're muted, but that's, and somebody else had mentioned that in the chat as well, Eric.
Okay, so there you go. Question I've had a few times this week. Is a professional external audit required? And, yes, sort of, if you can. A classic church answer. Okay. The manual, first of all, there's no external requirement. Most of us don't have bank debt or shareholders, or even the CRA Charities Directorate does not require an external audit. They recommend one if your revenues are over 250,000. But literally a treasurer signing, you as treasurer signing financial statements is good enough for the Charities Directorate. We're not incorporated, so we don't have any corporate provincial corporation rules. The manual describes all the aspects of what are in a pretty thorough, professional accounting type review. But frankly, lots of places can't even find an auditor to do this, let alone what it costs these days. So the advice I've been giving for years, frankly, is to get the best review you can find and afford. And those are all really squishy words. And check with your region. If you can afford an audit and you found a professional accountant to do that, that's absolutely great. It provides the maximum assurance not only to the congregation, but also covers the butt, pardon my language, of the treasurer. It provides, the treasurer with some comfort too that they're doing things right and someone else has looked at it. However, if you can't do that, something called an independent review is fine. It incorporates most of the elements that the United Church contemplates in the manual, but there's all kinds of other approaches, the best you can find and afford. So I know of one region where they do treasurer swaps, where literally I'm a treasurer, the next town over has a treasurer, maybe a whole bunch of us get together and review each other's books, check some basics like bank reconciliations and whatever, so that there's been some degree of review. The best you can find and afford. And the other key point, you've heard me say this about any number of topics, whatever it is you decide, make sure the congregation knows. Hey, if you're trying to save money by not having a professional accountant do it, describe what you do. And in fact, I've done independent reviews and for congregations. I can't anymore, but I literally put a letter at the front saying, I'm not even an accountant, but I do know a few things about church books. And these are the things I've looked at. So there's a key answer. If you're in a smaller congregation, even finding someone who's not on the board in your own congregation who's comfortable with numbers, every little bit helps. And we do have to take steps against fraud. I'm constantly reminding people there's a lot of fraud in the faith sector. And fraud is a successful fraud is never, ever committed by someone who wasn't trusted, right? So you've got to have some safeguards, and this is one of them.
I would say it goes beyond that, though, Eric. We just went through a review in my congregation, and the accountant picked up a couple of issues that we had forgotten about because life got busy. So we had raised money to send kids to camp, and we hadn't spent it all in 2019. She came back and said, well, what are you doing with this money? And we'd all forgotten about it. We had collected money for the food bank, and in the middle of all of the mess of COVID, nobody had written the check to give it to them. So there was $1,000 sitting there. I mean, it wasn't huge money, but it wasn't ours either. And with the best will in the world, people goof. And it's been a crazy year. And so to have somebody once a year just look things over and make sure that we're doing what we say we're doing has been a wonderful gift, worth every penny.
No, absolutely. But what I'm saying is best you can find and afford. Sometimes you have the money, and it's you in a smaller setting, you might not be able to find someone to do it.
Right on.
Church audits, in the same way as church insurance and church other things, are notoriously unprofitable for the accounting profession. So there aren't that many folks who do it.
Yeah.
Okay. So
listen, for low pay.
Yeah. So listen, I'm going to turn things over to our bearded accounting guru now to take us through some of the more hands-on stuff that I don't know enough about, and he certainly does. Clyde.
Okay, am I on this time? Yep, looks like it. So if we can just back up there, adding people to the business account. This has come up a number of times in emails to us. We're suggesting that we have at least 3 people on your business account so that if somebody decides to leave the church, it's not the one that's got the only connection. You want to make sure you've got some backup with it. Each person needs to sign up. The name must be on the list already. And by the list, I am not referring to the T1235, the T1235 being the list of directors and officers that goes to the Charities Directorate. That never gets over to the tax side of the CRA. So your best way to get people added there is by motion of your board, council, session, whatever you call it, and include the names of the people in the motion to say these are the ones that should be authorized on the CRA account. And then with all their personal details, name, address, phone number, not the birth date, because that's not required in this part of it, but their social insurance number is, and what position they hold in the organization. And they'll be added to the account, and then they can access through that. They have to go in through the steps and get themselves on the account, but their name will be there to start. The other way, yes.
Clyde, just to, a lot of people get fussed when the CRA asks for, as part of their verification, something from your own personal tax return. But that's what you were referring to later. This is how you get on the list, and then you need to go through the enrollment process where you get asked for that kind of thing, correct?
That's right. And they need that personal information because they are concerned about giving out information to the wrong people. And supposedly you're the only one that knows your social insurance number. And you may be asked about your own personal tax return. But again, it's because supposedly you're the only one that knows that.
So it's about proving your identity.
Exactly. They can't see you, and photo ID doesn't do a thing for them.
Right.
So the other way is to go in and get the individuals to sign up as represent a client, and then authorize them, because at that point you'll know who's on the list and can sign the authorization form.
So the name must be on the list. How does it get on the list, Clyde?
That's what the letter is for, that's to be sent in, that has all the names of the people authorized.
Okay.
But then it should come through your official board and be a motion from that, so that the CRA knows that it's an official request, not just somebody writing a letter to them.
Right. And Clyde, why don't, you do this kind of stuff all the time. I'm going to offer that we'll even provide a template on request, or throw a sample template on the web or something, just so folks don't have to create this kind of stuff on their own.
Well, and you did a webinar about this a year ago, Clyde. Has anything changed, or should we just give people a link to that?
Nothing has changed. A link to that would be helpful, but I'm not sure whether we mentioned the list on that or not, but a template of the list would be great.
Okay.
Okay.
Yep. Okay, on to the next slide. We're going to change gears here and talk about electronic access. And we're looking here at all of our various different electronic ways of doing things. At minimum, you should have your CRA My Business account with somebody in the congregation having access to it. We all need ADP payroll. We've already been talking about that. Angelica outlined that very quickly. And again, 2 or 3 people named on it would be of benefit. They can be the same people, but what I prefer to suggest in congregations I work with is that ADP is more of a M&P operation. And if somebody is capable at the M&P committee, they should have the access to ADP. Your treasurer needs it for reporting, not necessarily to do the other changes. And then Service Canada is not as important now, because with the new ADP system, and that is providing you have all of your employees on ADP, the ROE is a click of the button, basically. It's almost that simple. And so you, in fact, I'll mention it. I've done an ROE on the new ADP system already. A month and a half in, and I've had to issue an ROE. So I know it works. Anyway, 3 people named, separate email accounts and passwords wherever you can. Do not use common accounts and passwords. And every employee eventually will be with their own access to ADP as well. And Church Hub, the other one that's electronic now, and we've already talked about it earlier, is to make sure that everybody there has their own email address and password so that they get the information connected with their position in the church. On to the next, we go to electronic payments. Receiving them, most of us know that Canada Helps has our accounts there. They deal with the credit cards, they deal with the payments. All of that works very well for them. And yes, there is a fee for it, but they also do the receipting. So there's a lot of savings that we don't have to take the time for. The one thing to remember, though, is that any donations that you receive through Canada Helps is actually a transfer from another charity. Make sure it's totaled up and accounted for properly on your T3010 form. Receiving e-payments or e-transfers, Interact transfers. Most banks don't like it because of the 2 account signatures. Business accounts can do it, but the business accounts are more expensive. If you happen to have one that got decent rates, then you should be able to get it even with a dual signature. But the banks may relent a little bit if you go in and talk to them. And I have found that I can get a lot more out of a situation if I do it with honey rather than vinegar.
See, I'm betting Edna Cook, if we could clone her and have her do this for us, we'd have better results.
She'd have every one of us signed up tomorrow. Anyway, the local small business bank officer is probably your best place to start, but don't be afraid to go up the ladder. And I say that specifically with all other major banks because I dealt with the TD Bank, and I had to go up to where I sat in the manager's office and asked him to phone downtown and ask about it. And we finally got the way the TD Bank can deal with them. It's a process that is cumbersome, but it can be done. Going beyond that, on to the next slide. Pre-authorized payments for your utilities and for your payments to the national church. Pre-authorized M&S payments. You've got enough experience in your church records to tell you what the average monthly amount might be. Set it up for that, or maybe just a little less than that. Once a year or once a quarter, send a check in to cover the difference. It will save a lot of check writing, saves time, and you know it gets there quickly. If you have your assessments on par, that works very well because you take it and it's paid over, I believe it's only a 10-month, or is it 11-month, Eric?
11, yeah.
It's 11 months. It always screws me up because I book it for January and then find it's not there on the bank statement. So anyway, they'll take payments on par. Just while talking par, I also use it to collect rents from my tenants. So I sign them up as though they're one of our congregants, and it comes under the other column. And we get a fair bit of dollars around the 20th of the month. It's really a nice way of making sure that it's there. So try to utilize the online banking wherever possible. And if you need to, get authorization, explain why, but set up a separate account, a single signature account in the name of the church to receive e-transfers and to make e-transfers out to pay some of your bills. If you've got enough to make it worthwhile, it works. And you just transfer funds back and forth between that account and your main account every month, every couple of months, whenever it's necessary. On to the next one. Dual signature accounts are a problem. I'm not saying they're good or bad because I have mixed feelings with them. But as I mentioned, TD Bank has lots of paperwork, but it can be done. I make regular payments to regular vendors through the TD Bank, but I do it online, even though we've got a dual signature account. But in order to get it, I had to have 4 of us show up at the bank at exactly the same time to be able to sign up.
Wow.
And that's crazy. And I cannot add a new vendor, nor can I delete a vendor from the list. It has to be done by the bank. And the last time I took the list into them to make the adjustment, I went back a day later to ask about it because I knew there was a correction to be made, and they had already sent it offshore to be keyed in.
Yeah. So bottom line, though, this is a hassle still. And
absolutely.
So I think, on the next slide, or we're going to be suggesting some other possibilities, but, in some cases, people are going to decide to not bother with trying to march 4 people down to the bank.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
All banks have business accounts. All business accounts, or most business accounts, have access to what's referred to as electronic funds transfer or automatic check payments. They have online payments, they e-transfers both in and out. And so if you can afford it to have a business account, and they vary in price drastically across the board, and a lot of it depends on how many transactions you're doing in a year, but that's an easy way to go. If not through that, if you're using an electronic accounting software, and the 2 that are used, I use Sage 50 all the time, but the other one is Intuit's QuickBooks. And in both cases, they have online versions, and there's software that can connect into them that can make all your payments for you. In this, or through the EFT transfers of the other one, it has reduced one of my largest clients from what I used to have a 6-page bank statement. And I would take that and I would spend probably a couple of hours trying to reconcile it. And this last month, they were down to 1.5 pages, and I think I took 20 minutes. And so it's worth looking at electronic connections if you've got the programs that are there. Some of them are very specific, some of them are direct connections, and some of them you have to key information in once, but you can use it again a month after month. So there are ways of dealing with it. Desktop software has it, as well as the online, which I mentioned before, but I believe that even Power Church, which is another popular one that's used has a way of connecting some of this. So one of the drawbacks is that the funding has to be there. You put up the money on a Thursday to get payments made out or on a Tuesday to get payments made on a Friday to your vendor. One of the nice things with TelPay, which is one of the 2 most popular in Canada, is you don't have any banking information in your systems at all. You tell them who the vendor is, what the address is, and they'll tell you that it's on their list of 150,000 vendors. And if it's not, they go through a process to get it added to their list so that it only costs you 50 cents a month or 50 cents a payment to make it. So it's worth looking at when you consider that the average check today, if we were being paid, would cost somewhere in the neighborhood of $23 every check to mail it out. And with this, it costs TelPay costs, and Pluto, which is the other one mentioned at the bottom, they have a fee for a flat fee on a monthly basis or per run base, and they per item base is about a 50-cent charge.
Yeah, and Clyde, this is the kind of stuff that, like, if you have scale, these solutions are great.
Yeah,
the United Church, our national office, for example, doesn't write a check to anybody except individuals. Where we try to have bank information for every single vendor, every single mission support recipient, and it's a nuisance, chasing them down, and some people, resist that for a time. But once they start getting their money regularly when they were counting on it, it becomes a real plus. And again, folks appreciate it 3 months down the road, if not while we're bugging them to get the information.
Yeah, one of the things that I liked was a story told a few years ago, and I think it still holds today. If you write me a check, because I won't give you my banking information, when that check comes back to you, whether it's scanned in or whether you get the physical check, just turn it over, look at the back of it, and you've got all the banking information. So you can add it to your accounts and pay it through the bank next time.
Yeah, I'm not sure that's official, but anyway.
Oh, it is. That's how Telpay started.
Yeah. So folks, we covered a fair bit of ground, and as I say, some of the stuff we're talking about is not for everyone, but I am having treasurers write me now every week, for example, on the Telpay and the other one, where they're saying, Eric, this is great. You need to tell others about it. So we'll try to, offer this in bite-sized paces for the folks that are ready for that conversation. Any questions on this section?
Yeah, if I could interject one thing, I would be willing, if there's enough people interested in Telpay or Pluto, and do your homework first. If you're interested in it, I can get a webinar set up where they'll do a presentation.
Okay, great.
And you'll know more about it in a very specific way.
I would also encourage the folks who are on Zoom to scroll back through the chat, because there's a bunch of different treasurer to treasurer comments that have been coming through the chat that might be worth following up on too. Some churches seem to be able to do this. Other people are running into roadblocks, and it seems to be very specific to the branch you're dealing with. Not even to the bank you're dealing with, but to the branch you're dealing with.
The branch.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
So scroll back and if you're with CIBC, look for those notes, and if you're with TD, look for those notes, and then take them into your branch and say, hey, this person is able to do it. How come we can't?
And that's one of the challenges through all of this. I mean, if nothing else, over the last year, we've learned that the stuff changes fast, and sometimes you have to, ask several times. So, are there any other questions out there on this, or should I keep moving?
One person has asked a couple of times. She doesn't need to use a fax machine for ADP anymore, so the only reason to have a fax now is to deal with she still needs a fax to deal with ADP. She still needs a fax to deal with PAR. I'm sorry, I'm confusing myself. ADP doesn't need it, PAR still does. When is that going to change?
PAR?
No.
We've been dealing with PAR for many years and haven't used fax.
I was thinking that too. In my congregation, I don't think we've used a fax. We haven't had a fax in the office for years.
Yeah, I've said some fairly caustic things about fax, but the reason we have discouraged sending PAR forms by email, and that's why fax has still been suggested as an option, because email isn't secure either. So we've actually been asking people to either fax or snail mail, frankly. And the solution that we haven't got, I can't give you a date yet, but it's been on the books for years around trying to come up with some kind of online way of doing that for you. But right now, I hate fax. I threw up my own fax machine, but it is the option that we recommend instead of snail mail. Some people ignore that and send it in by email. And if we get it that way, we process it. But we're just pointing out that it's not as secure.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to keep moving here. So just a few things on the cues, folks. The short answer on all of this is, we're into periods 14 to 16. We're not talking about how to do it anymore, but they have confirmed that this thing runs until June for sure, and they confirmed how the periods will work. And if any of this sounds like really freaky, scary, happy to try to catch people up, but we're a year into this now, and the short answer is the spreadsheet. Trust the spreadsheet. It does all the work for you really, really well now. You know, people are asking me, will it continue past June? Who knows? I've got nothing on that. And you know, so much will depend on you know, how vaccines and this, you know, next wave variants, all these things. Our job right now is to adapt and try to support each other as best we can, realizing that there's way more demands on this role, this volunteer role, and way more uncertainty. And that's why we release stuff in what I call beta. When we release stuff where you can't print it yet, we want you to be able to see it, but we will get you the print functionality, you know, in a week or two type thing. Okay, that's the update on Qs. Budget considerations, I've listed these here. I've covered these in past, just, you know, how much subsidy to, but the main thing through all of this, whatever you're doing, whether it's claiming a subsidy or anything else, talking to your congregation, we just need to point out that, hey, we need your support. You know, my congregation had a bump in giving this year, responded really well. Lots of places might not be able to say that, but these are the factors. You know, we don't know when we're going to be open. We don't know if there's ever going to be the normal that we used to know. So you just have to alert people to what the cost assumptions are, things like the cost of living, or, you know, benefit costs. You know, there are worksheets for all these things. You know, it is going to be a bit of a guessing game. There's nothing more I can say about that. The governance extensions, just a reminder that right now the official thing is you can have a board approve a budget, you know, approve a budget, and you don't have to have an AGM, and you might have to have a couple of years worth of AGMs. Right now, the official date approved. I mean, who's going to force you to do any of this right now? Who are we kidding? But nonetheless, the official rule is that there's an extension granted by our governors to June 30th. And, you know, frankly, I see a good chance of that being extended. Provincial grant programs, you know, some of these are closed now. Manitoba had one that churches were getting. Newfoundland had one that kind of excluded United Churches, but a few got grants. Alberta has a program where we've been providing grants to congregations, but we've had to provide a letter confirming that, you know, we're unincorporated and all that. Ontario had a grant program that was limited to, if you could say you were a concert hall or community center. It wasn't good enough to be just a church. But Ontario has just also announced today, literally about 4:35 o'clock, something this is all we know, to support faith-based and cultural organizations that are struggling due to additional costs. So there'll be more detail on this. As soon as we have it, you know, we'll either pump something on the website or do a bit of an Ontario-specific broadcast. It'll probably be in the news too. The main things to look out for are what, you know, if it has, you know, whatever information it requires, whether you have it or whether you might need the denomination to provide a confirmation letter. Whatever is required, we'll do it. I'm putting the CEBA language in again, only because this slide was deleted until Monday when the government announced the extension, but it's really important to have this wording if you're going into the bank or doing your online application. Okay, remember Edna, the local branch kept saying no, 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 and eventually, and I kept saying file online, you know, try not to even deal with people who may or may not know. The language has changed. We lobbied the politicians last June and got this result. And you know, congregations that have the right kind of revenue, specifically rental or sale of goods and services, line 4610 or 4640, you know, are eligible for this. The United Church Emergency Loan Program, again, moving targets, right? We did say that those amounts needed to be repaid by September 30th of this year in order to qualify for the forgivable portion, the $500 grant. Right now, I haven't even gotten this officially approved, but everybody thought COVID would be over by now. So I'm putting on this slide that the deadline of September 30th is pushed to at least December 31st. And I'm sure there's some committee I have to get that approved by, but there it is. And again, the loans, the whole loan program, and whether it's lines of credit or anything else, we do have a significant facility to provide bridge financing. Every region, I think, has set up an expedited approval process. That continues, and we're going to have moving targets on that, depending on how COVID plays out. But what you need to know is we've taken as many steps as possible to be able to do this, including major line of credit nationally and expedited regional processes and so on. So any further questions? I think what we're going to, I've got a couple of just sort of reminders, but we're more or less done in terms of new content.
One quick question from Jim Patterson about TeamPay. Do employees have access to their own information at TeamPay?
I'm not sure. Angelica should probably comment, but certainly the idea on any payroll system is that employees can access their pay stub at least.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think Angelica's left.
Yeah, the pay slip, the pay statement, they'll be able to get their T4 at the end of the year. And I believe they can only look at and change their address.
So if that's not happening yet, it'll be part of the rollout.
It's part of phase 2 going into phase 3.
Okay. So all this transition stuff, you have to do a little bit at a time or it all gets screwed up, right?
Right.
The chatter in the chat really is treasurers helping each other. There's not a whole lot of questions here, gentlemen.
Keep that up, folks. One of the outcomes, we're doing webinars, which we reach, I would say the keeners are the most desperate combination. But, I think we may want to formalize some kind of, discussion group or some mechanism for sharing information, because it's just changing way faster than the church ever imagined. The church will never keep up with how fast the world's moving right now. But we're trying to use these tools to share information. So just keep doing what you're doing there in the chat room.
Sure. And I should acknowledge a note that I put in the chat that I'm sure everybody noticed. And that was that, the chat disappears after the meeting closes, but I won't close the meeting until nobody's here. So when we're done tonight, I'm going to go away and have supper, but I will leave the meeting open and you can scroll back through the chat and copy down, cut and paste any of the information or ideas you found from another treasurer that's helpful. So take as much time as you need after we're finished formally tonight to pick up any of the tips that have come through the chat. I know it's really hard to read it and listen because that's my job and it's tough. I'm sure it's tough for you too, but yeah, it'll be there for you for as long as you need it tonight.
And we'll also, we go through this stuff afterwards in terms of, any themes, we'll include in the core content. Yeah. So next month, as I said,
let me just also put, Monica's pointing out that everybody has the option to save the chat for themselves if they want to, and I'm always on as a host, so I didn't realize that was available to you. So down at the bottom of the chat on the right, 3 little dots, one of the options is to save the chat. So you can do that and then read through it at your leisure if you want to go cross-eyed. I mean, if you find that would be helpful.
I'll tell you something. I just learned something. I do that with my Rogers telecom complaints and upgrades, but I just learned a new thing myself. So thank you, Monica.
Thank you, Monica, indeed.
Yeah.
I was just looking for it because I knew it was available, but I didn't know who had it.
Yeah. So folks, the deadlines, just on your queues, again, if you're doing month by month, which is what I'd recommended for everyone, even if you've never qualified before, you might next month type thing. Basically, the deadlines are 6 months after the applicable period. If there is anybody still out there without a T3010, that the CRA, I happen to know, has mailed its reminders just around the 3rd week of February. So there's still a chance to potentially avoid the $500 fine for, let alone the revocation of your charitable status. And we mentioned the CEBA extension already. The contact information, just this will be on the slides that are available with Steve. I'm not going to read each one, but we have them here, whether it's stewardship, whether it's church loan payments, whether it's assessments. These are the various emails, addresses for action. And then Clyde and I have ours as well. We'll warn you always that there is quite a bubble of activity after one of these webinars. So our response times can vary a little bit because we do triage. But just to close again, as I always do, it's a remarkable, I've been a church treasurer a long time myself, and it's a remarkable, people don't realize just how significant a role it is. And COVID just multiplied that a time or two. So thank you for what you do for your own church, what you're doing for the whole church, and your generosity matters. So thank you.
Okay, well, friends, I'm continuing to watch the chat. And again, there's treasurers helping treasurers. Not a lot of questions, but this is your last chance. Before we close off for the evening, if there's any comments, questions that emerge for you, now's the time. I don't put the chat public because I don't really want Google to search it. There's information that's specific to various pastoral charges that emerges in the midst of our conversation. So you can save the chat if you're on a desktop. Somebody said they couldn't on an iPad. I do save it for Clyde and Eric, and they will go through it too. And as I say, I will leave it on tonight for as long as you would find it helpful. So feel free to scroll back and find what you need. Other questions? I'm not seeing any.
In that case, as I say, my provider, I used to have a tradition last spring where my partner would bring me a beer about this time, but she's on another floor teaching a University of Toronto course right now. So that's just the way life is.
Well,
I brought my own with me.
There we go.
Oh, there you go. Well, I have pasta waiting for me in the other room, so I'm going to head out too.
Okay, folks.
I'm going to take Clyde and Eric into a private breakout room where we can just do a little bit of debriefing with each other and check in and see if there's anything else that we need to talk about. But at this point, we're going to say goodnight to the rest of you. I checked in with Eric yesterday, and he's interested in continuing these monthly webinars on the last, I think it's the fourth Tuesday
Fourth Wednesday.
month. Fourth Wednesday, I beg your pardon. I'm just kind of pulling up the dates here. So our next one would be April 28th at 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific, and then May 26th, 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific. We're kind of moving this on into the future for as long as it's valuable and necessary, but the next two dates are posted. And as we've done before, you don't need to pre-register, just come and join us. It's always the same link. Glad you're with us, and we'll look forward to seeing you next month. Bye for now.
Thank you, folks.
Thanks, everybody.